Hi everyone, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom U'Barach.
I'm very full from this service, so just know I'm very emotional and I'll get over it. So delighted to be here with you guys. Thank you, Denise from Jewish Child and Family Services, for inviting me today. Thank you, Rabbi. And thank you, Cantor Leslie, wherever you are. Just a beautiful service. I'm so honored to be here and try and share a little bit of my story with you. I'm just going to check the timer because I don't want to, I know everybody's hungry. Okay. What I'd like to try to do today is talk a little bit about what I believe alcoholism is. I use the words alcoholism and addiction interchangeably, so you'll see that I will be doing that. I believe alcoholism is a disease, as it is very much outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That is how I got sober. So what I'm going to try to do is show you how it really is a disease of the mind. It's a disease of our thinking. In a way, my brain just became hijacked by alcoholism. And I think that what I'll start with saying is alcoholism. I did live in Los Angeles for 22 years, and that's where I got sober. Alcoholism is listed in the American Medical Association as a disease, and the reason I talk about this and stress this is because what really made sense to me and really helped me. And it helped relieve me. I did do the 12 steps, but it helped relieve me a lot of the shame surrounding alcoholism, because it is a disease. It's not something I asked for. It's not something I chose. Perhaps it's genetic. My father died very young of alcoholism. He was 38. He was a doctor. He was creative. He was funny. He was magical. He was all the things. But his brain was held hostage by this condition. And the statistics are very, very grim for getting sober. Something like 10 to 13% of people who are alcoholic get and stay sober for the rest of their lives. So I feel incredibly grateful for the 12 and a half years that I have. Alcoholism, like I said, is listed as a disease in the American Medical Association. So what that means is, initially I think it was listed as a physical condition in the 70s or the 60s, and then in 1992, it was upgraded to a disease with both physical and psychiatric components, meaning that it fills rather three criteria, which is that it has symptoms, it's progressive, and it responds to treatment. So like I said, that has helped me very much accept my alcoholism and deal with it. So I'll take you back just a little bit to where it started for me. Within the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, the way we speak at meetings when we tell our stories, and I've done this hundreds of times, is we break it up into three sections: what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And so I'll try to adhere to that. That's usually effective. The first time I drank was in high school. I wasn't particularly enamored of it, but I certainly didn't know how to drink. I drank right to blackout. And then the first time that I truly had an experience with the way a drug made me feel, and for sure pills were my drug of choice, pharmaceutical drugs. The first time was after I was 19 years old and I had my first kidney transplant in Toronto, and my mother was the donor. And I remember the discharge nurse said to me, if you still have pain, because they sent me home with Tylenol 3s, and she said, if you still have pain, you can get Tylenol 1s over the counter. And I remember the evening where I'd been home for about a week. I didn't really have pain, and the time for my painkiller had kind of come and gone, but I thought I should take my pill as prescribed. So I took this Tylenol 3, and something just came over me differently that day. It was a complete mind, body, spirit shift and experience. And I remember feeling completely at home in my skin, just authentically myself. I could do and say anything that I wanted to without fear. And that for me is really the core of alcoholism, and the core of my issue is that I'm always in fear, and I'm trying to get into faith. I'm trying to find my way to God. And there is a saying that quite often alcoholics are like low-level seekers of a spiritual experience, because in a way, when we drink, we're able to do the things and overcome the fear that we have and be present in a way that we couldn't before. But of course, with alcoholism, it changes and shifts. And so my experience with having fun with drinking shifts into fun with problems, and then it just becomes problems. So anyway, I was 19 years old when I had that experience, and now I know that was that feeling that I would be chasing the rest of my life, is that feeling of feeling completely in my skin. So I don't want to spend too much time on, my drinking years, as it were. But I'm an unusual alcoholic in that the disease is most certainly progressive, but it wasn't, I didn't drink a lot, I didn't abuse drugs until about 40 years old. So that was 19. When I was 40 years old, my husband and we were living in Los Angeles, and my first kidney transplant went into rejection. And I really had I was in so much fear, like I said. I had absolutely no tools. I didn't have any kind of community with a transplant community. I didn't have any religion that I was a part of. I didn't have anything really to plug into. And so my tools for coping with this huge fear of mine, what was my life going to be like? How was I going to survive? How was I going to get through this? Was I going to die? What did all of this mean? My tools became drugs, and my tools became alcohol. And I started to do all of the things that typically you hear alcoholics do. And what I didn't know is I was starting to lose the power of choice. And that's a critical piece with alcoholics that normal drinkers, really can't get their head around. Alcoholics lose the power of choice. There's a craving that's activated at some point. And once that's activated for me, I can't come back from one sip. I can't come back from one toke. I can't come back from one pill. There's a craving for me that has to be overcome. And that's what started to happen to me when I was about 40 years old. And all of a sudden, I was doctor shopping. I was looking for more drugs. I was hiding wine in my boots in the cupboard away from my husband because I simply couldn't stop using and drinking. And a really good example of me losing the power of choice was when I went to pick up one of my prescriptions, for my migraine medication, which was a drug I became very addicted to. It was a drug called Fiorinol, and I had gone to the pharmacy to pick it up. And normally I got a bottle of 60 tablets, and for some reason, they handed me this ginormous bottle, and I knew something was up. And so I took a few steps away from the pharmacy counter, and I looked at it, and it was 120 tablets. And I remember holding this bottle up and looking at it and thinking, oh, I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to get sick. I'm going to get so dope sick. And I knew there was a part of my brain that knew that I wouldn't be able to stop. And I knew I should go back to the pharmacy counter and give these drugs to the pharmacist and say, you made a mistake. And I couldn't do it. I could not, and I didn't understand why I couldn't do it, but I couldn't do it. And when I told my first sponsor that, she said, that's you losing the power of choice. And that's what happens to an alcoholic. So, my husband and I, we drive through Maine and Higgins pretty much every day in order to get home. And I look at these people and I'm them. I'm them. They have simply lost the power of choice. Their bodies are so addicted that they can no longer stop. And again, I don't want to, okay, I have time. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on the drug stories. But what happened to me is I needed another transplant. My husband was a match to give me a transplant. And we had our transplant at Cedars-Sinai, and I guess, where do I want to go with this? A couple months later, nothing changed. The first thing I did, we were still in a hotel room down by Cedars-Sinai, and the first thing I did after I got discharged was take a Corona out of the bar fridge, chug it down with my Dilaudid and my Percocet. I don't know what the Canadian equivalents are, because I don't do drugs anymore. So anyway, they're like, opiates. And that was the first thing I did. It made total sense to me. Made total sense to my brain that I was just celebrating getting a new kidney. I had no concept of anything. I had no concept of gratitude, what Kevin had gone through. I mean, I wasn't a monster, but the core of alcoholism, as it's outlined in the big book, which makes sense to me, is it's a disease of selfishness. And I'm constantly consumed with myself and what my needs are and feeling okay and comfortable in my skin. And so a few months later, we went home. It just progressed. It was progressing at such a rapid rate by this point that I was now drinking vodka. I was getting more drugs. And one night I was at home, and it was 2 or 3 in the morning, and Kevin and I were like existing like roommates. We just were like ships in the night. He worked all day. I just ran around trying to get more drugs from doctors. And that night I ran out of vodka, and it was just a crisis for me. It was an absolute crisis. And I'm sitting there at 2 in the morning, I'm nodding off, and I simply can't stop drinking. And I remember very clearly thinking, like having this thought process of there has to be alcohol in the house somewhere. And then I remembered, and I thought, oh, okay, it's clear. It's just a higher proof. Why not rubbing alcohol? So I went under the bathroom sink, and I snuck by the bedroom door so that I didn't wake up my husband, and I went into the kitchen, and I think it was either lemonade or pineapple juice, and I thought I was a genius because I made this delicious cocktail, and I drank a rubbing alcohol cocktail. And I always have to share about that when I speak, because I have to remember the insanity of this disease, and I truly believe that it is a mental illness, and I am in a state of insanity when I'm in my alcoholism, when I'm drinking or using. But I'm also very much like that if I don't treat this disease as a sober woman. I can very much become someone that is selfish and self-centered again, and in a way abuse other things. Alcoholism is very much a disease of more. Like, I always want more. I'm never satisfied. I'm never okay with this amount of book sales or this amount of attention or this amount of sugar. It's just a craving of more all the time. So I'll talk a little bit for my remaining few minutes about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. For me, that is what has changed everything for me. I went into treatment a couple of months after I drank rubbing alcohol, and excuse me, what was so powerful about being in treatment was I found other people who thought the way that I thought. I was there for 60 days, and I was introduced to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they used to bring in people to who had some time to bring meetings into us. And I remember this Hispanic man who was so incredibly powerful in his talk. And he spoke about beating up his mother to get money so that he could go and buy meth or crack or whatever it was. And I remember part of me not even flinching, but just thinking, oh, I understand that. I understand why he would do that. I beat up my husband because he tried to keep my drugs from me. I don't care. When I'm in my alcoholism, I don't care. That's what you're dealing with. So I share these stories because there's a lot of stigma still around alcoholism and addiction. And the only person that can help themselves is the addict, is the alcoholic. It's not personal. If you love someone who's suffering, who is acting out, who's punishing you, it is not personal. It is simply, my drug comes first, and then everything else comes after that. And so that's how I treat my alcoholism today. I put my recovery first, and everything else, I mean everything else. My kidney transplant comes second. My marriage comes after that. Sorry, sweetheart. Everything else comes after that, because if I don't treat my alcoholism, everything else will become impacted, and eventually I will lose it. That's what I believe, and that's what I've seen, and I know how grim the statistics are. The 12 steps for me are a way of life that I simply don't have the time to get into, but it's an admission of a kind of powerlessness that I can no longer be running my life. It's a willingness to turn my life over to a spiritual program. And what that entails is a lot of hard work with the 4th and the 5th step in particular is like an inventory process where I look at my part, I look at my resentments that I hold towards people, and I look at my part, and then I'm willing to go forward and make amends to those people. Sound familiar? And that has been, it's all about the freedom that I want to find inside. Like, how free do I want to be? How free do I want to be from this condition of self? I continue to look at my behavior every single day. There's many things that I do every day. The 11th step for us is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And the reason that's so important to me is a couple of years, I'll end with this story, a couple of years into my recovery, I was struck, there's really no other word for that, with this condition. It was a skin condition that went all over my body, and it turned into a kind of a nerve condition very similar to shingles. And it was an excruciating kind of pain that honestly, I didn't know how I was going to survive it. I needed some kind of relief, and I knew in my core I couldn't have anything. I couldn't have any kind of drug. I couldn't have any kind of medicinal marijuana. I couldn't do anything like that. I knew I would relapse. I know that. I know that I've lost the power of choice. And so for me, it was a true abandonment to something I didn't understand. I didn't understand what God was. And one thing I really love about Alcoholics Anonymous, which worked for me, was they're very clear and very humble about we don't know. We know that this has helped some people, but we don't actually know. We don't know what God is. We don't know. We believe there's a God, and we want you to develop your own conception of God. And that's what's so powerful about the 12 steps and Alcoholics Anonymous, because there are a lot of people that come into the rooms with religious trauma. And for me, the idea that I could, at that period of time in my life, create my own God or have my own relationship with something was so appealing. I was so desperate for something to stay sober. And to me, what that meant, my own conception of God, was that I could talk to God any way I wanted. And I did. And I was mad. I mean, I've had a lifetime of health issues, and I was in so much self-pity. I was so angry. I felt so justified in my anger. And I told him off. I told him to F off. I gave him the finger. I screamed. I cried. And the most incredible thing happened for me. It didn't matter what I did, because I was still seeking. In all of those feelings and in all of those emotions, I was still seeking, and I found something. I found something that kept me sober through what ended up being 6 years of pain, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. The 12 steps have changed my life in a way I can't summarize in a 18-minute talk, but I will say two last little anecdotes about an experience I had in Israel when I was there in 2018, and I was at the height of my pain during that period of time. So two things happened. I went to a meeting in Tel Aviv. It was amazing. It was amazing. It was in a bomb shelter. And I think it was actually a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and there were only about 6 or 7 of us women, and I don't speak Hebrew, so I'm sitting there and it's all in Hebrew. I'm just like, but I'm so happy to be sitting there with my people. And I looked up and I saw the Serenity prayer in Hebrew, and it was such a powerful experience to have that in front of me, and that I could connect to these people who understand the way that I think. They understand why I would go under the sink and get rubbing alcohol. And that is one of the most important pieces of of Alcoholics Anonymous is finding these people. We have this shorthand and we speak this language of the heart. And then afterwards I came upstairs and my sweet husband was waiting for me with my cousin who lives there. Both my cousins, I guess, were there. And this woman came up and she saw me talking to Kevin in English and she said, "Oh, you don't speak Hebrew?" And I'm like, "No." And she goes, "I love you." I'm like, "I love you too." And it was just, I don't know if that can land. I'm sure it can land. Of course it can land. It was so meaningful to know that I was seen and understood for this condition that nobody asks for. And the other story from Israel that was also so meaningful to me, and it was so brave of him. We went to an open meeting together in Jerusalem, and we were like, "Where is it? Where is it?" And then we saw this building and all these people smoking outside. We're like, "That's where it is." And so anyway, we went inside, and it was on step one, which is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And we were reading from the 12 and 12, and there was, I don't know if you use Orthodox or not, but there was there's a rabbi there, and I had just shared in my share about how I just was so horrible to my husband because he was not number one anymore. Drugs were number one. And when it came around to this rabbi's turn, he referenced me and my share, and he said that he doesn't know, he now knows why he can't stop being an a-hole to his wife, and that this program, what was helping him change himself. And it was so brave of him and such a powerful example for somebody new coming into the rooms to hear that sometimes religion works for people, sometimes therapy works for people, sometimes the 12 steps helps people get sober, sometimes it's a combination of all of them. But I think the key is to speak with an honesty and a humility, that I am so grateful that I'm sober today. I wish my father had gotten this, but he didn't. And so if there's anything that I can take away, leave you guys with is, yes, I have written 3 books, but that's, and the first one is very, very much about our story during our first transplant, my second transplant. But I have these flyers that will also be in the social hall. My phone number is not on there. My email address is on there and my website. And I mean it when I say if anybody wants to talk to me about alcoholism, I'm willing. I will really, truly talk to anybody about it because I'm so grateful I'm alive. And thank you for this beautiful morning. I'm truly touched, and it's so meaningful for me to be here today. So thank you.
Shabbat shalom.